Okay, hello, welcome everyone. I would like to welcome today Michal Knapp. He was here recently, but today he is going to talk about something very
completely different. Hello to everybody. I just realized that on the desktop of this computer there is still my old presentation from last year, and it was focused on biodiversity, arthropod biodiversity in agricultural landscapes, and this really main topic of our research group. Which one? Our research group is insect ecology group, but now it doesn't work. Switch on, switch on. It's on.
right now.
Works. Thanks. And our hobby, or my personal hobby, are ladybirds and their biology, different aspects of biology. So this talk originated this morning in train traveling from Prague to České Budějovice. So I think that probably it will really produce or motivate you to ask on everything, because I'm not sure that there will be a fancy story inside. So don't be afraid to ask me any ladybird related questions. Maybe even during my talk or after it, it's up to you. And ladybirds are quite popular beetles among citizens, and surprising is that even among people who have no idea of the existence of ladybirds or probably are not entomologists. But there is something strange on this slide. What is strange here? And if entomologists will check all the stuff, how many species are present here? Just a single, yes, one-spot ladybird. But actually we have around 6,000 or a little bit more species, right, currently. They have something similar. Most of them are aposematic colored. They really are quite awful and defended by their chemicals. But what is also quite interesting is that their distribution deviates quite a lot from other arthropod groups. So the highest species richness is in a temperate zone and not in tropics, which is probably typical for groups of your interest. And they are also quite important for people because they can serve as natural enemies of some important pests in agriculture. On the other hand, some of them are also phytophages and can work as pests. There is another one species, many of you probably are familiar with it, because this species is visiting our homes during autumn and during winter. It is invasive species, Harmonia axoides, and a huge proportion of our research is focused on this species, but at the same time, we are also interested in many other, our native Central European species. Harmonia axoides is quite variable. There are several different color form. Some of them differ really genetically. Some of them are just representatives of phenotypic plasticity, because coloration is affected by developmental temperature. And this topic is investigated at your university by Olga Nedvěd. So I will not be talking about that a lot. But what is quite interesting is the story of invasion by Harmonia axoides, because it was used for quite a long time as a biocontrol agent in orchards mainly, and there was no problem. But in late 80s, in North America, two maybe subspecies, or at least clustered from original range in Asia, were put to contact, and this was the origin of invasive Harmonia axoides population that then several times again was mixed with introduced biocontrol strains in other parts of the United States or even in Europe. And what is again quite interesting, this species, despite originally mainly interesting because of its invasion, became a kind of a new model organism for entomologists, not just for people interested in biological innovations, but a really huge amount of work started to be done there. Studies interested in physiological mechanisms and so on and so on. So, and what is also interesting, if you check well-known model organisms, there is no invasive species among them. So maybe people are searching for a model species for biological innovations. Yeah, just to let you know that that complete genome is already read and so on. A lot of stuff we are not interested in basically in our group, because we are more interested in ecology-related physiology of ladybirds, in their behavior, in their interactions with natural enemies and pests and so on. But if I will return back to my idea that Harmoniaxeris can represent a kind of model organism for biological innovations, there are basically two options how to investigate which traits are important for invasive species. One option is to compare at population level populations, non-invasive populations in original species distribution range and populations which probably somehow changed, or maybe not, because success of their invasion is related to environmental conditions in a new invasive range and not to change in their traits. So one option is to compare populations from invasive and non-invasive range. This study, for example, shows quite nicely that invasive population has increased reproduction rate. What is interesting is that one ladybird is able, from invasive population, is able to produce high thousands of eggs, up to 10,000 eggs, which is quite unique among beetles. And yeah, this probably is one of potential reasons why this species is so successful. On the other hand, you can see that biocontrol strains, they are selected to reproduce fastly, so they start their reproduction just few days after eclosion. And invasive strains typically reproduce for a longer time. Of course, invasion can be somehow related to interactions with other organisms. This study quite nicely represented in original range. Harmoniaxeris are sometimes infected by spiroplasma, whereas in invasive range, spiroplasma is missing in Harmoniaxeris. And later I will be talking a little bit about our own study of Harmoniaxeris interacting with some parasitoid species. Alternative option is to compare traits of invasive and non-invasive ladybird species or species in general. And another potential reason why Harmoniaxeris is so successful during its invasion, maybe I will just briefly return to the map. And nowadays, probably in a few years, quite interesting thing will happen, because invasive and non-invasive populations will meet each other somewhere here. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that Putin will complicate a little bit research in that area, but let's see. So it will be quite interesting thing from an evolutionary point of view. And Harmoniaxeris is spread almost every year in mountains. Also, distribution in South America is larger. There are old Ladybirds, if I remember well, described occurrence in this part of Africa, and it is spreading from Republic of South Africa northwards. So probably nowadays it's invasion, the range is much larger than on this map from 2014. And yeah, so one potential reason is that it is a real generalist regarding its dietary requirements. And it is quite nicely shown in this study, quite surprising study, showing that the ladybirds, epiphytophageous ladybirds, typically, all of them are considered as epiphytophageous, need plant materials for their reproduction, successful reproduction. With one exception, Harmonia axyridis, where when for this species sterile from plant tissues were not increasing reproduction and viability of eggs. What is quite strange in this study that number of eggs produced for Harmonia axyridis were quite low compared to other species, and it is, from my personal experience, quite strange thing. So probably I should ask our authors for their explanation. But what else can be important for success of this invasive species? Really efficient immune system. This study was published a few years ago and trying to convince us that with increasing invasiveness, because our seven-spot ladybird from the first slide is invasive in North America and some other regions, immune system functioning is improved. Unfortunately, typical such studies are comparing just few species, for example, 3 in this case, and to get real evidence, you need to perform a comparative study using much more species, optimally more than 20, for example, cleverly selected from the genetic tree. And this is one of our tasks for following years. For example, data for immune system we already completed, but we are working on some other data sets for stress resistance. I will show later. So, and what is interesting, if you compare more species, then Harmonia axyridis is not a so super immune system developed species, like it can be visible just from comparison of 3 species, seven-spot ladybird, and I think that's Adalia data was in the already published study. And it seems that there is a genetic signal because all these 4 species, our native Harmonia quadripunctata, the closest relatives of Harmonia axyridis in Europe, have similar efficient immune system. If you measure efficiency against Escherichia coli, so antimicrobial activity, we were also measuring some other parameters, but for simplicity, I will show just this one. And they are the most related other groups, Rheumatomegalines. It will be nice to get some data also for Hippodamia. I expect that also Hippodamias will have a super efficient immune system. And those other species are not invasive at all. So probably the simple explanation based on immune system doesn't work. We, for example, compare desiccation resistance. So we let beetles under laboratory conditions without any water. In the first step, we standardize somehow their condition and feed them and provide them with water as laboratory, and then we start this desiccation resistance experiment. And black bars indicated so stressed animals, and these were control animals with water and food. So you can see that some species, like those ladybirds, are much more resistant to desiccation or absence of water in the environment. We are also interested in thermal performance of insects. So this year, and we started last year, we are gathering data for a huge amount of ladybird species and we are interested in their CT-min, CT-max, endpoints where they are not able to ecologically work, so they are not able to move, basically, at that temperature. Yeah, and we are doing it for again, more than 20 species of ladybirds. This picture is quite recent from our faculty, because I'm a little bit more interested in art than in science. So nowadays there's illegal exhibition of modified bachelor and master thesis of my students, and I'm trying to provide our students or other students from the faculty with opportunity to read text from our final thesis. So I modified them a little bit. A lot of them are somehow related to ladybirds, and yeah, it's quite funny. You can visit us. It's probably the best motivation to travel to Prague and to Sudol, which is out of Prague, actually. Okay, because it is quite time-consuming to perform some experiments using a lot of species. Of course, we are also performing some experiments related to stress resistance in ladybirds using just one model species, Harmonia exoridis. For example, in this study, hopefully it will be published this year, we compared effects of heat waves and increased temperature on performance of adults, and we exposed pupae to increased temperature or heat wave because they are not able to escape. Adults are flying quite well. Larvae are able to climb plants and search for a suitable microhabitat with somehow buffered temperature, but pupae and eggs basically are not able to escape from environmental conditions. So we exposed pupae to 3 different temperatures for 48 hours. And then we were interested if it affects somehow low temperature, stress resistant, high temperature, stress resistant in adults. We are also interested how it works for fresh adults and if this effect persists or disappear with aging of ladybirds. And it seems that for temperature, this trait is, or thermal resistance, trait is quite plastic, but for some other traits, for example, immune function measured as hemocyte concentration, it seems that what is affected during pupal stage then consistently continues throughout the life of adults. Also, starvation resistance of adults was significantly affected by temperature experienced during pupal stage. And when we measured some kind of proxy of fitness, reproduction during first month of life, also you can see that heat wave during pupal stage can have a negative effect on reproduction. In another study, it is actually my first ladybird study, and now I remember that it's 10 years ago, so it's older. We should probably to celebrate anniversary. We investigated how similar heat waves, but we were exposing different pre-imaginal stages from eggs to pupae are affecting ladybirds. And for example, this plot shows survival. So if you expose eggs to high temperature, really a huge proportion of them is killed. If you expose first larval instars, still significant effects can be observable, but I skipped another figures for later exposure, but there was no significant effects on survival. But you probably should stretch your neck and move your head. But even for ladybirds which survived, their adult traits can be somehow affected. And what can be interesting, if you remember the picture with different color forms of harmonic X-rays from the beginning, if you expose ladybirds to high temperature during pupal stage, then melanization decreased a lot. If you expose them in early larval stage, there are almost no difference compared to control individuals. So we can observe something like thermal melanism adaptation in ladybirds because it can be somehow related to their performance. Another bench of our studies is related to overwintering performance of ladybirds. Basically, as heat waves and high temperatures are interesting during growing season or summer, overwintering survival or performance is interesting during winter periods in temperate zones. So what is quite interesting, survival is negatively affected by very low temperatures. We were mimicking somehow different temperature regimes based on existing meteorological data. We have climatic chambers, computer-instructed climatic chambers, which are able to create whichever temperature regime you want. So we are using natural fluctuations. And but what is maybe even more interesting is that when we tried to analyze laboratory reared animals and compare it with field collected animals, there was a super huge difference. This can be problematic because if you are working with model organisms, typically you want to breed it in the laboratory, sometimes for many generations, and use it for your research. And if they perform so much different compared to real specimens from the field, it can complicate a little bit your conclusions. Probably we were not able to induce a real diapause for our lab individuals, and it was not because of photoperiod or temperature regime, but our explanation is that what we really didn't provide it to them was an autumn migration or flight to overwintering site, and it can trigger some physiological processes in animal, this quite long flight. But basically, animals that were exposed to more serious cold during winter had higher mortality, but on the other hand, they spent just a smaller proportion of their energy reserves. And this resulted in increased post-overwintering condition or ability to survive a period without food. And this is quite critical period for ladybirds, because if you stop your overwintering diapause in February, for example, or early March, and start to search for the food, there is typically almost no food for ladybirds in nature. So it is not possible to conclude that low winter temperatures are more dangerous for ladybirds than abnormally high winter temperatures. Right now we are running quite a long-term research exposing ladybirds in some boxes to different habitats and microclimatic conditions, from lowlands to mountains. And it seems that high temperatures are more harmful for ladybirds than low temperatures actually, and there is very interesting interaction with humidity, because it seems that humidity is sometimes more important for overwintering substrate than temperature. We are also a little bit interested in what is going on inside of ladybirds during winter. So in this study, my PhD, formal PhD student, he defended PhD last year, Michal Knapp, investigated how immune parameters change during the winter, and you can see that there was a continuous decrease in hemocyte concentrations, quite independent of temperature regime to which ladybirds were exposed to. We are also interested in something called immune challenge or inducibility of immune system. So, and our results are quite interesting that before the winter, in late autumn, ladybirds are able of some induction. So after exposure to live Escherichia coli, they increase or release hemocytes to their hemolymphs from their bodies, or they are able to increase probably by production of antimicrobial peptides efficiency of killing of Escherichia coli. But if you repeat the same after winter, there is almost no inducibility of immune system. So it is some state of it seems that the immune system is somehow switch off. In another study by Michal, we were interested in ontogeny of immune parameters, because a lot of studies are quite ignoring that immune system of insects can change in time. And ladybirds are, because of their biology, larvae should to grow as fast as possible, because source of food is quite temporal. And they are not investing a lot into immune system, and also fresh adults, 1 to 4 days old adults, still have incomplete immune system, and it seems that it takes 2 weeks or a little bit more to get a really completed immune system for ladybirds. Another slide where I can skip. And now something maybe more interesting to you. We are also interested in behavioral experiments, and one quite interesting behavior by ladybirds is reflex bleeding. It is a defensive anti-predatory behavior, and because high concentrations of alkaloids are included in their hemolymph, so if they are endangered, they provide the predator by a drop of hemolymph, and it is really efficient behavior, because in great majority of cases, then ladybird is not attacked. It can work in maybe, or I think that it is not just a pure chemical defense, but also there is really fast coagulation. It is, for example, why hippodamias were missing in our immune parameter comparative study, because it is almost impossible to sample their hemolymph, because immediately after they will provide you a drop of hemolymph, it's changed into a glue, and it is impossible to work with the sample anymore. So and it also can work a little bit mechanically. There are some nice videos of ants attacking ladybirds, and with glued mandibles they are escaping back away from ladybirds. But one should ask, are there some physiological costs of this behavior? Because if you are providing just compared to human, if you have 5-6 liters of your blood, ladybirds are providing during one reflex bleeding event 10, sometimes 15% of volume of their hemolymph. So imagine that you will provide half a liter or 1 liter of your blood to somebody. Probably it will have some physiological, it will pose some physiological costs for you. So we were interested if it is somehow efficient of their immune system and it affects. And also we were interested if it somehow reduce fitness of individuals, and it has a super small effect on start of reproduction, if you really start with reflex breeding, and it was really intensive reflex breeding, we tried to force them or push them for reflex breeding every day. Not every day they were keen or willing to breed, but it is probably much more intensive breeding than in nature, but nobody have data from nature. My expectation is that it can take place once per week, maybe. Olga, your opinion?
Once a week.
Yeah, who knows? Probably nobody is observing one ladybird for more than 1 week, maybe even not more for more than 2 hours. And so there was observable effect on delayed reproduction start, but there was no difference in reproduction capacity or eggs produced during the first months of ladybird life. So it seemed that this cost is almost negligible for them. And we are also interested in interaction between ladybirds and their natural enemies, because also, yeah, natural enemies, like ladybirds have their own natural enemies. And I will be talking just about one ectoparasitic fungi and one parasitic wasp, braconid wasp. Maybe you are familiar with Hesperomyces fungi. Few years ago, general opinion was that there is one fungi species utilizing as a host at that time 50 species of ladybirds, maybe even more nowadays. But then Michal Waters published a study showing that there are, based on molecular data, independent lineages of Hesperomyces parasites on different ladybird species, and this year species from Harmonia axyridis get its new name, Hesperomyces harmonia. And what is quite interesting, in general, Hesperomyces parasites are quite rare. For great majority of ladybird species, prevalences are around 1% or even less in nature. But for Harmonia axyridis, we show that at least in Central Europe, some populations have unexpectedly high parasitation rates. This can be important for fighting with Harmonia axyridis as invasive species if this parasite is somehow dangerous for it. Who knows? There is, but for sure, it is quite surprising, such high prevalences. One explanation is this overwintering behavior, because this ectoparasite is transmitting during a long-term contact between individuals. So one option is during overwintering in these segregations. Alternative option is during mating. Here you can see Hesperomyces here again, which Harmonia axyridis is quite famous for its sexual appetite, and but again, a lot of ladybird species do the same. So who knows? This was the first study by Michal Waters showing that Hesperomyces can increase mortality of ladybird hosts. And we were in our study interested, so it was for growing season, we were interested if the same take place during overwintering, because as we previously showed, immune system of ladybirds is somehow switched off during overwintering. And there are some effects, so there is increased mortality, but it was, the effect was actually lower than what we expected. And it seemed that infected ladybirds are losing higher proportion of their energy reserves during winter. And at least for males, they have somehow reduced, again, post-overwintering mortality, longevity. But what was quite surprising for us, there was almost no effect, just marginally significant effect on Escherichia coli antimicrobial activity. There was almost no difference between infected and uninfected individuals regarding functioning of their immune system. So it seems that there is almost no interaction between ectoparasite and immune system of ladybird. One potential explanation is that ladybirds are inactive during winter. Also, parasites are inactive somehow, and they are growing and affecting ladybirds mainly during growing season. And this is what we are right now investigating and analyzing some samples in collaboration with colleagues from Masaryk University. And let's see, who knows how immune system works during growing season. Yeah, just I used one nice picture by your student from Anna Vosolsobie from University of South Bohemia, and it seems that this punk hairstyling of ladybirds caused somehow their problems, and maybe harmonia will change into disharmonia. What was quite interesting question for us: how it is possible that there is so high prevalence of Hesperomyces parasite in harmonia exodus? Because if there are negative effects on ladybirds, one can expect that ladybirds will try to defend somehow to limit transmission of parasite. On the other hand, potential explanation is that Hesperomyces was able to win somehow evolutionary fight and is able to, for example, modify ladybird behavior. Because mating is very important transmission route for Hesperomyces infection, we decided that we will perform a behavioral experiment where uninfected or infected ladybird males will be provided with 2 females, one uninfected and infected. Also because female behavior is quite important during mating, and ladybird females, similar to humans, can refuse or escape from mating. So we decided to switch off half of our ladybirds by freezing and killing them. But freshly killed ladybirds are still equally attractive for ladybird males. So we really just switched off female behavior. It's a little bit drastic, so probably no such experiments on humans. And yeah, let's see what happened. We also repeated experiment in early spring, immediately after overwintering and during growing season. And it is quite well known that during early spring, every ladybird wants to mate with everything having 6 or maybe even 5 legs. So there was no preference, but during summer growing season, there is surprisingly strong preference of uninfected males for infected females. For example, here for alive females, just 20% of uninfected males selected uninfected female and 80% selected infected female. This indicated probably they should be super attractive. Yeah, males probably already mentioned that this, recognize that this blonde hairs, blonde hairs can be attractive to male. But how they are doing it is a mystery right now. We have some hypotheses. Another important thing, because this parasite is transmitted, it needs a time. So duration of copulation was again increased for infected females, and even both for alive and dead. So it is not because of behavior of females. And it was much more increased for uninfected males. So specifically uninfected males perceived infected females as attractive, and they spend super long time by copulating with them. Maybe some of you knows that those structures can be particular hydrocarbons, which can work as one of cues of attractivity of insects. So right now we are analyzing in collaboration with German colleagues particular hydrocarbons from infected and uninfected ladybirds, and also surface of Hesperomyces fungi, and let's see if this will be a potential answer how attractivity of infected females is increased. And the last, how long I'm talking? Quite long. Super. So the last topic we are interested in, there is quite interesting parasitic wasp, Dinocampus coccinella, which is interesting to biologists because it is manipulating host after exiting its body, and the host is still alive and is guarding a pupae of parasite. It is because of RNA virus causing a serious infection of nervous system at the moment when parasitoid is emerging from the host. And this Dinocampus wasp was well known that is able to utilize quite a huge amount of ladybird species, prefers large ladybird species. For example, Harmonia exoridis is large, but evidence from last few decades was that that Harmonia exoridis is suboptimal species for this parasitoid. Prevalences in nature were pretty low, just typically a few percent of individuals, or in many populations there were no parasitoids emerging from Harmonia exoridis hosts. And we observed in Czech Republic a few years ago that something strange happened, probably some adaptation of our Dinocampus wasp populations to novel hosts, to Harmonia exoridis. And from that time, we are somehow collecting data using different tools like citizen science in collaboration with colleagues from Crop Research Institute, or we are asking colleagues, this is also my request on you. If you will be traveling somewhere, you will see ladybirds or even pupae of Dinocampus wasp, take them to pure ethanol and we will do something with them. Because what is interesting, this species is really cosmopolitan. It lives everywhere except of white parts, in all continents except of Antarctic. And nobody knows evolutionary history of this how this distribution emerged, because ladybirds were translocated repeatedly because of biocontrol purposes. So it is possible that original species range was somewhere here, but we have about 150 years old data also from North America that Dinocampus was present there. So, and there is probably no alternative to molecular phylogeography, how to resolve this interesting question. So we will be very happy for your sample. And that's probably all. Yeah, I want to thank you for your attention, and also to all my collaborators from the team, and also collaborators from Masaryk University, to Olga and many others I forgot to list namely here. Thanks a lot. And of course now there's a time for questions. I promised in the beginning.
Okay, Matthias.
Is it known the reason for this special case of campus infection, like that the pupa is outside of the beetle? Is it somehow more safe under the beetle than inside the beetle?
It's yeah, because ladybirds are full of alkaloids. So typically predators are not trying to attack them. And there is one study published by French colleagues, I think, showing they were manipulating presence of guarding hosts, and it resulted in 3 or 4 times higher predation of pupae by ants. So it works really efficiently as a guard. But why it is not inside?
Because ladybird has very tough cuticle. They are really hard.
Yeah, it can be problematic to exit.
Be difficult to get out, but in the larval stage, it is easier to get out because the larva is elastic, so it can go up.
But who knows? This is one of possible explanations, and I even don't know how to perform an experiment investigating this.
It also could be like that they're in this family of the wasp that it's a common way. Yeah,
it is surprisingly unique.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
I had a related question to this page. So I was on the picture that after the pupates, then the larvae, the ladybird molts away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
This
it's
is
like,
this is also super unique that this parasitoid is not killing host, or it is killing probably accidentally. It depends on species of host, but for example, for 7-spot ladybirds or harmonias, it seems that 60–70% of ladybird hosts recover fully from parasitization, and they again start to feed and start to reproduce.
yeah, that's really cool. I was just wondering how it happens, like whether there is something.
Because there is a trick, but it is not so unique for Dinocampus wasp. But it is quite common for many other braconids, and that they are not feeding directly on tissues of their host, but they are emitting something called teratocytes, specialized cells from egg, and they are growing and growing in the hemolymph of the host, accumulating nutrients, and the larvae is actually feeding on these own emitted cells. So it is not damaging anyway tissues of the host. It is just draining it out of energy.
Yeah, then just hope so. That's cool.
How common is this system among
Teratocytes.
yeah, among
We are collaborating with Mike Strand from United States, and I think that he described it for quite a huge amount of species, specifically in braconid family.
Is that you said that the distribution of ladybirds in general is more in the temperate zones or than in tropics?
Why?
Why is it like this?
Related to their food. Aphids,
Aphids?
originally cooks.
Or, yeah. So I don't know. I know about this. I mean, the patterns of aphids are there. They are less in tropics. So.
Maybe that Olda knows or potential hypothesis why this distribution is quite strange.
Yes, I would say that aphids, by their biology, are more diverse in temperate zone, and ladybirds secondarily are diverse because of fertility.
if they are really dependent on aphids, then yes, because there is a huge difference in species diversity and abundance of aphids between tropics.
Yeah, I can imagine that abundance is more important than species.
But some ants having mutualisms with aphids here were able to switch to scale insects. So you can wonder whether the coccinelles are unable to replace aphids with anything, therefore there are.
Some of them, yeah,
How steep is the gradient?
I think that it is not so super steep. But it is surprising that it is not increasing towards tropics.
Yeah.
It is about equal.
I've seen that like, so the asteroid is spreading without borders, I would say. What would have to happen to stop the distribution? Or I think so it's
After colonizing all available terrestrial habitat, I suppose that it will stop on shore lines.
But there might be a contact between the original populations, but it looks like the Himalayas stopped the native populations from moving to the west, or is it not like that?
I'm not, unfortunately, from that region, data are quite rare, but it's in the beginning. It was too long presentation.
They are quite common north from Himalaya.
Yeah, here, and also I think that this is just schematic, that it is not realistic.
They don't go with the kind of alpine.
I think that's probably somewhere here is a real range of native distribution. And this is just to illustrate that two subspecies or really distant populations were mixed here. So yeah, and probably nobody knows what will happen with this native range, if it will be completely, if native ladybirds will be displaced by invasive ones or.
And there is no one knows why it became invasive.
There were several hypotheses, some of them I already mentioned. Super high reproductive capacities, super efficient immune system, and so on and so on. But probably it's a combination of a lot of different characteristics, traits, and
Yeah, I was just thinking like it's very common that many species become invasive because they don't have the natural enemies. If they get in contact, you could have a transmission of enemies that are present in the native range.
but it seems that with this rare case of spiroplasma, there are no indications that some of course there can be some spiders and birds. Some birds are also able to feed on ladybirds, but I don't think that this natural, in my hypothesis, is working for harmonious.
Viruses, perhaps.
I think it is more working because you showed our data about a high prevalence of the wasp, the Dinocampus. It was in 2015, probably. But the species is present here from 2006.
But what was interesting, this Harmonia exodus was suboptimal host even in its native range. So now it is more affected by natural enemy, by Dinocampus wasp in its invasive range. Maybe the same also happens in Japan or China, but we don't have data from that region. But
it lasted many years. So in the beginning, the enemy-free hypothesis could be explanation of the initial part of invasion.
But I am afraid that this will be applicable just for the case that in native range there will be super high parasitization by Dinocampus, and it was not the case.
It can mean that, like in the native range, they are protected to some degree, and which is costly, right? So that it doesn't allow high parasitism rate, but at the same time, it's a pressure on the population.
But when you think about this invasive species in plants, then it's well established that the lack of herbivores helps, but it's never enough. There always has to be some kind of like historic combination which will allow the plant to be invasive, and then it helps that it doesn't have native herbivores. So I would guess here probably also some of these life traits you mentioned, and then whether enemies help or not is another issue, but probably not the only explanation.
But the problem in insects is that probably it is impossible to develop some universal definition of combination of traits which make a species invasive, because life histories are so diverse across insects that I think that probably nobody tries to solve this question because it is almost impossible. No more questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. No, nothing. Check.